Ryan, an amateur filmmaker, browsed the cluttered stalls of a local flea market, where old knickknacks and forgotten relics were piled high. His eyes scanned the tables. An unmarked VHS tape. The tape was dusty and worn, with no label or markings to hint at its contents. Intrigued by the mystery, Ryan picked it up. He took it home, thinking it might provide some strange or entertaining material for the evening. Later that night. At home, Ryan slid the VHS into the player, listening as the machine hummed and whirred to life. The TV screen flickered before settling into a thick static. After a few seconds, the static cleared, revealing distorted, shaky images. The first thing to appear was an old, dilapidated house. Its windows were broken and its structure sagging as if under the weight of years of neglect. Strange, faint whispers echoed from the TV, too quiet to make out fully, but their eerie tone sent a chill down his spine. The room felt colder, and unease settled over him like a heavy blanket. A low, guttural growl began to build from the speaker, growing more intense, until it suddenly cut out, leaving the room in absolute silence. A tight knot of anxiety formed in Ryan's chest. He quickly reached for the remote, intending to stop the tape. But the TV remained unresponsive. No matter how many times he clicked the buttons, nothing happened. The static on the screen continued to flicker, and the whispers started again, this time louder, almost commanding. Suddenly, the TV crackled loudly, and when Ryan turned back to it, his stomach dropped. The screen was now showing his living room, his exact living room, just as it appeared behind him. But there was something wrong. In the reflection of the TV, a dark, shadowy figure stood directly behind him. Fear gripped him as his eyes widened. He spun around to see if it was there, but before he could make sense of it, a loud crash shattered the tense silence. And everything happened at once. The TV flickered wildly, and before he could react, an invisible force yanked him toward the screen. The world spun around him as he was pulled into the darkness, the last thing he saw being the static-filled screen of his television. Ryan woke up with a start, his heart racing, but something was different. He wasn't in his apartment anymore. The familiar surroundings of his home had twisted into a decaying, distorted version of themselves. Disoriented, Ryan scrambled to his feet, trying to get his bearings. He rushed to the door and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Pulling and pushing with all his strength, but they too were sealed shut, as if the very fabric of this world was designed to trap him. Panic began to set in as he realized he was trapped. No matter where he turned or how hard he tried, there was no escape. As he stood there, helpless, a soft, distant echo of footsteps reached his ears. They were faint at first, but growing louder, approaching from the darkness. Fear spiked through him, and he instinctively moved to the far corner of the room, trying to make himself as small as possible, hoping whatever was coming would pass him by. From the shadows emerged a woman. Her presence was unsettling, but also strangely reassuring. Her name was Megan. Without needing to speak much, Megan made it clear they were trapped inside the cursed tape, prisoners in this alternate reality. And they were not alone. Something hunted them here. A shadowy entity that stalked the halls of this twisted world, seeking out anyone unfortunate enough to be trapped within the tape. If it found them, they wouldn't survive. Ryan's mind reeled, trying to grasp what she was saying, but there wasn't time for questions. A deep, rumbling sound echoed through the walls, growing louder with each passing second. Megan grabbed Ryan's arm, pulling him into action. They sprinted down the warped, distorted hallway, the walls twisting and closing in as they ran. The sound of the entity's approach filled the air. A sharp, metallic screech that sent waves of terror through them. They fled, narrowly escaping the looming presence of the entity, but the danger was far from over. As they moved deeper into the distorted world, Ryan's fear grew. He didn't fully understand the rules of this place, but he knew one thing for certain. The entity wouldn't stop until it claimed them. If they couldn't find a way out, they would be trapped here forever, hunted, cornered, and ultimately consumed. The cape's origins slowly began to unravel as Megan flipped through the pages of the old, weathered diary they had found in the house. The diary was the key to understanding everything. It was written by Walter Creel, the man who had created the cursed tape. The pages were filled with his obsessive thoughts and disturbing ambitions, recounting how a seemingly normal filmmaker from the 1960s had been consumed by a dark, twisted dream. He believed that by trapping genuine terror on camera, he could make a horror film that would transcend time itself, not only scare its viewers, but also trap their souls in a never-ending cycle of fear. The howling wind outside the decaying house seemed to echo Creel's dark ambition as Megan turned the brittle pages. Her face was pale with realization. This wasn't just a cursed tape. It was a prison, a horrific world crafted by Creel's dark rituals and the occult. The VHS tape wasn't just a medium for fear. It was a tool to capture and enslave souls. Creel had turned to forbidden rituals, combining his knowledge of filmmaking with the dark arts. Using these rituals, he imbued the tape with a sinister power, allowing it to trap people within its twisted reality, feeding on their fear to fuel its existence. But as Megan read further, she learned that something had gone horribly wrong. Creel had not anticipated the dark forces he was trying to control. The entity, a shadowy being tied to the curse, had rebelled against him. Creel's attempt to harness the entity's power backfired, and he was pulled into the very world he had created. Now, Creel's spirit was trapped within the cursed realm, serving the entity and feeding it new souls to sustain his twisted existence. Megan's voice was filled with a mixture of horror and resolve. There had to be a way out, a way to break the cycle. She refused to believe that they were doomed to share the same fate as Creel's countless other victims. But as they discussed their next steps, the house began to warp around them. The walls seemed to bend and twist, the shadows creeping and crawling across the floor as if alive. A familiar low growl echoed through the air. The entity was coming. Megan and Ryan bolted for the exit, their hearts pounding as the walls closed in on them. The once empty and decaying house now felt suffocating, each corner filled with danger. They barely escaped the house, stumbling into the darkened landscape outside just as the entity drew closer, its grotesque shadow stretching toward them. But then, they encountered someone they hadn't expected. Eddie, an older man who had been trapped in the cursed realm for years. Eddie was a stark contrast to Megan. He was cynical, bitter, and had long given up on any hope of escape. Eddie's voice was cold and detached as he revealed his grim understanding of the curse. There was no escape, he claimed, unless you were willing to sacrifice someone else. The only way out was to trick someone new into watching the tape, passing the curse on to them. Eddie's ruthlessness shocked Ryan and Megan, who had been clinging to the hope that there was some other way. But Eddie's words planted a seed of doubt in Ryan's mind. The idea of dooming someone else to take their place weighed heavily on Ryan, but Eddie's relentless manipulation began to wear him down. The thought lingered. What if there really was no other way out? Eddie's influence on Ryan grew as they ventured deeper into the cursed world. He began to suggest that Megan, with her unwavering determination to find a better solution, was standing in the way of their escape. Ryan's mind swirled with conflicting thoughts, torn between loyalty to Megan and the seductive promise of freedom. Eddie, ever the manipulator, whispered his dark plan. Megan could be the sacrifice they needed to escape. Suddenly, the entity's growl echoed again through the dark. A reminder of the ever-present danger surrounding them. Yet amidst the growing tension, Ryan secretly met with Eddie, agreeing to consider his plan. Eddie's smirk betrayed his satisfaction. The old man had planted the seeds of betrayal, and now all he had to do was wait for Ryan to act. But in the cursed world of the tape, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed, and the consequences of such a betrayal would be far greater than Ryan could ever imagine. Ryan's internal struggle grew heavier with each passing moment as the plan to betray Megan unfolded. The fear of never escaping gnawed at him, yet the weight of his decision to sacrifice her began to suffocate him. Meanwhile, Megan remained focused, unaware of Ryan and Eddie's intentions. Her attention was on Walter Creel's diary, where she uncovered more clues. But the problem remained. The tape existed somewhere within the cursed world, a place where nothing stayed the same for long. Ryan and Eddie prepared their trap as Megan pored over Creel's writings. Eddie, convinced that summoning the entity and making a deal with it was their only hope, led Ryan through the steps to call out to the evil force. They raised their voices, calling for the dark presence that lurked in the shadows of this twisted realm, hoping to strike a bargain. The world around them responded. The air thickened, and shadows stretched unnaturally across the room, creeping toward them like living things. Ryan felt the tension in the atmosphere, doubting the plan, but it was too late to turn back. The entity made its presence known. The air grew colder, and the shadows thickened, coiling around Eddie and Ryan. The entity did not bargain. It took. Eddie's mistake became evident as, in a split second, the shadows surged forward. Eddie was swallowed by the darkness, his scream cut off as quickly as it had begun. Ryan stood frozen, watching in horror as his accomplice vanished into the void. Panic set in. Desperate to escape, Ryan turned to flee, but the entity's grip was swift. The shadows dragged him toward the abyss, and soon Ryan, too, disappeared into the consuming void. Megan, left alone after Ryan's betrayal, gathered her strength. Though shaken, she knew there was no room for fear. She had uncovered a critical clue. The original tape still existed, and it held the key to ending the curse. Deep in the house, she found a hidden passage leading to a long-forgotten room. There, resting on a dusty shelf, was the source of it all, the tape labeled Creel. With the tape in hand, Megan flipped through Creel's ritual notes. The answer had been there all along. The curse fed on fear, and only by confronting that fear could the curse be broken. It wasn't about bargaining or escape through deceit. It was about facing the terror head-on. She began the ritual, preparing the symbols on the floor, carefully placing candles, and repeating the ancient incantations she had discovered in the diary. The cursed world around her seemed to react. The house trembled as if resisting her actions. But Megan continued, her determination unwavering. The entity, sensing its hold weakening, stirred. The oppressive darkness thickened, and the wind howled through the decaying house. Yet Megan remained calm, her fear dissipating. She knew now that the curse was powerless without her fear. She had taken away its greatest weapon. As the ritual reached its climax, the room trembled violently. The entity howled in rage, its grip on the cursed realm faltering. The walls cracked, and the oppressive atmosphere lightened as Megan's defiance shattered the fear that had bound them all. For the first time, the curse's power weakened, and the entity, starved of the fear it had once thrived upon, began to lose its hold on the world it had claimed. The decaying house groans, its walls peeling away, revealing a void at its core. In the center stands Creel, his figure distorted and inhuman, embodying the darkness he once summoned. Despite the chaos, Megan remains focused. The ritual must be completed to break the cycle of fear that Creel and the entity have fed on for so long. The cursed tape, the source of all their suffering, is placed in the center of a symbol-laden floor, a final piece in her plan. The landscape of terror continues to warp violently around her, but Megan doesn't waver. Facing both Creel and the entity head-on, she steps forward with newfound strength. No longer consumed by fear. As the ritual intensifies, the very foundation of the cursed world begins to fracture. The cursed tape, the core of their prison, is destroyed. The entity's monstrous form disintegrates, its dark power unraveling with it. The house, once a symbol of Creel's twisted control, collapses in on itself, crumbling into ruin. Silence falls. The wind dies down, and the oppressive atmosphere dissipates. The walls that once held them captive are now nothing but dust, and the cursed realm fades into nothingness. Megan finds herself standing alone, free. The air is still, the house in ruins, and the curse, at last, appears broken. But as the darkness fades and relief sets in, the scene shifts abruptly. The faint sound of a steady beeping fills the air, the unmistakable rhythm of a heart monitor. The cursed house and Creel's world are gone, replaced by the sterile, cold environment of a hospital room. Megan opens her eyes, disoriented and weak, her body unfamiliar and frail. She looks at her hands, seeing the passage of time etched into her wrinkled skin. Then she saw a surprised nurse called the doctor. According to the doctor, Her coming back to life is somewhat like a miracle, and she was in a coma for the last 40 years. The weight of 40 years in a coma presses down on her as reality sets in. The life she once knew is long gone, replaced by a world she doesn't recognize. Overwhelmed by the revelation, Megan's heart races, her mind spinning in disbelief. The doctor's words echo in her ears. 40 years lost to the curse. She tries to process what's happened, but the world around her blurs as panic builds. Then, something in the corner of her vision catches her attention. A soft hum fills the air, familiar yet out of place. The TV flickers with static, its screen emitting the eerie glow that once signaled the cursed tape's power. Megan's eyes widen in horror. Her gaze drifts to the bedside table. Cursed VHS tape lies innocently, as if it had been waiting for her all along. The realization sinks in. It's not over. The curse still lingers, reaching out from the static. The room spins, the beeping of the heart monitors intensifying as Megan's fear returns. The cycle is far from broken.